Hello, everyone. This is Chad Frischmann, and I'm on a quest to find the most impactful solutions that not only help to solve climate change, but move humanity closer to a regenerative future. Climate change is the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. This is not an alien attack or a monster from the deep seas. It is a crisis of our own making. Nearly everything we do as a species, everything our economy produces and consumes, emits greenhouse gases that are warming the planet and causing catastrophic climate change. And climate change impacts everything else, from increasing poverty and food scarcity to climate refugees, devastating biodiversity loss, and destruction to ecosystems and human systems that we are only beginning to glimpse of today. So, we have to change everything. And this is where it gets interesting. If we have to change everything, then it can be an opportunity to build a better future by design, a regenerative future that benefits humanity and the planet. Welcome to Chad's Climate Quest, where we will be talking to some planetary-grade thinkers and doers who are pouring their energy, wisdom, and intellect to solving this great challenge in ways that benefits all. And on today's episode, we're welcoming my good friend, John Goesdschalk, Executive Director for our Conservation International's program in Suriname, as well as, he's been working in business and he's been working for government. He was a special advisor to the president of Suriname, and he has been working for a long time now for the environment and for people. Welcome, John. Before we get into our discussion, though, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Again, I want to, remind folks this is the second episode of Chad's Climate, and it's my first Twitter-spaced podcast, so there is a learning curve. Please be patient with any technical glitches and smile at all the gaffes. And feel free to send along constructive feedback to help improve the show as we go along. Second, this is a 30-minute discussion. If you have any questions, please tweet them in the thread. If we have some time at the end, we can open up the floor for folks listening in. Just request to speak at the end. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm thrilled to welcome you, My Climate Quest. Hi, John. Thanks for coming on My Climate Quest.
Super happy to be here, Chad. Thanks for having me.
John, you and I have become really, really fast friends over the last few months. And so it's a real pleasure to have you on our show today. But for our audience, who might not know you yet, tell us a little about yourself and how you came to work at Conservation International, one of the largest and most well-known international NGOs working on the environment.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure, Chad. So I'd just like to echo that. We met at Future Horizon in Rio, and we immediately just felt a kinship. And I like to think that that's because we're both really kind of married to saving the planet and saving humanity, right? So that's our shared love. So I think that's what unites us, and that's actually what I think unites a lot of us here on this chat right now. Or on this Twitter stream, or not sure what it's called, Twitter stream. I'm not really keen to any one types of technology. As long as it connects us, then I'm good to go. So in terms of what brought me to conservation, Chad, I don't know if I told you the story. I think I did. I might not have though. So if not, let me share with you right now. It was, I think, a little bit over a decade ago. It was 2011 that I was actually doing an assignment for the government back then. And they asked me, what has conservation meant to the country? And in order to answer that question, I had to go back and study a lot. And a lot of that study was about climate change and biodiversity. And as I learned more and more about it, it became clear to me that the country I live in and the city I grew up in is pretty much doomed. I mean, I'm not saying like hypothetically or kind of doomed. I'm saying like really doomed. Like our city, Paramaribo, is the second most vulnerable to sea level rise in the world. And the city where I grew up in is, by all accounts, set to be almost unlivable within the next 50 years. So that, when I learned about it, of course, frightened me and it saddened me. Most of all, it lit a fire under me, because I remember saying to my wife at the time, hey, the city, guess what? It's disappearing. And so she looked at me and, she had just given birth to my daughter. And she's saying, "You're going to do about it, John. What are you going to do about it?" And that was it. I dedicated my life ever since to doing what little I can to save my country and to contribute to saving our way of life as humanity as we currently know it, which means fighting to mitigate climate change. I'm fighting to improve our resiliency to climate disasters. All of it. Yeah, so that's how we got here.
That is really, in some sense, heartbreaking to think that what drew you to you're back to your country because you were living in Amsterdam, if that's right.
Yeah.
And, to go back to your country was the fear, that emotional response to seeing or thinking about the place where you grew up, where you raised, where you lived your life for so long, potentially disappearing. What did it feel like to be grounded in that reality? You said you were saddened and frightened with that fire up, but like there are many people who are going to be experiencing this, and they're experiencing that today, and they're going to increasingly experience that, fear. What got you? What was really that way that you turned that fear around into lighting that fire? Because we all need that. What did you do?
To be honest, Chad, there is so much we can do. And I was lucky to be exposed to a couple of ideas that touched me, I guess, or that connected with me and what I thought I could bring. And I grabbed hold of that. And maybe it was arrogance or maybe it was something else, but I really thought, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to save my country, and I'm just going to do it. And again, maybe it was arrogance or maybe haughtiness or something, but I didn't try to think of something to do. I just thought, let me learn from what others have been doing. And there were so many great stories out there, and there still are. There are victory stories unfolding around us every day. Every day there are stories of victory and success and learning. So again, I was lucky enough to be in touch with some of those, and I just held on to it. I said, hey, I saw some really smart folks doing stuff, and I said, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to put in my 2 cents.
I love that. I love that. But John, it's so funny that you say arrogance a few times. That doesn't sound like arrogance to me. That sounds like humility. You actually thought to yourself, what are other people doing? Let me learn from others and take that on and take action. It's that process of gathering and aggregating humanity's brilliance, that knowledge, and then taking action with that and sharing it. So that doesn't sound like arrogance to me. That sounds like you were emboldened to take action, being bold, taking that step forward. And we all need that. And so you're at Conservation International now, but you're also launching this amazing quest with our friends at Future Quest to protect Suriname's forests. And this is obviously connected, right? You're protecting your country and improving people's livelihoods. Can you talk a little bit about what this quest is? Like, how does avoiding deforestation, improving livelihoods in Suriname help mitigate, adapt, and maybe save your country?
All right. Let me take you back to where the quest was born. Okay, so I think it was day 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7 of the Future Horizons event in Rio. I don't necessarily know which.
That's all a blur.
It's all a blur. But I think it was on day 3, and I was sitting on the beach, Copacabana, together with Leo and Stefan and some other folks. And we thought to ourselves, what's the single biggest thing we could do leaving here and the quest? And one of us said, why don't we just stop deforestation altogether? Let's not reduce it. Yeah. Let's not minimize it. Let's just stop it. And specifically in Suriname. Why in Suriname? Because Suriname, we're a small country, right? There's 500,000 of us. There's 50 million hectares of forest, and we're already carbon negative, right? So we said, if we can take this the last mile, if we can put Suriname over the hump and become not just carbon negative, but deforestation free, truly deforestation free, then that's something that we can really kind of pour ourselves into. So we said, how do we do that? So we thought of all kinds of crazy stuff. But at the end of it, what crystallized from this, or what we settled on as one of the main interventions, not the only one, but one of the main ones, is we are going to really unlock the power of the bioeconomy in a forest-rich country. This country has, per person, 30 hectares of tropical rainforest. So what happens when we find a way to unlock that value using the bioeconomy train of thinking, so to speak, and by doing that, we crowd out deforestation. So to make that very specific, we have 10,000 hectares of deforestation a year in Suriname. 10,000 hectares, okay? That's coming mainly from gold mining. Now, if we want to stop that, that means that we need to earn more or as much for the people living in the situation. And we're going to do that by taking, let's say, some of the most ingenious things that we've thought of as unique, which is the franchising system, right? I mean, you don't have to like McDonald's or any of the other companies, but what they did with franchising, boy, I tell you, I mean, it is absolute genius. So we are going to take that idea And I jokingly called it our concept McNuts the other day, which is not the right, which is not the right thing.
Let's work on that branding together too. Let's figure that one out. We'll figure that branding out. I'm not sure that works.
Neither do I.
But okay.
But the idea is we are going to make it possible for forest-based communities and tribes to tap into the wealth of the bioeconomy of their forests using non-timber forest products. And we're going to create the rest of the infrastructure in terms of market access, in terms of certification, health, hygiene, production training, all of these. And we're going to leverage that. And we are going to crowd out gold mining.
Yeah. So this is not just about conserving and protecting ecosystems, which are absolutely essential, right? It's essential that we protect these incredibly precious ecosystems and biodiversity. About people's livelihoods. It's about approving people who need to survive. They need food and they need, shelter. And they need to have improved well-being, access to electricity, comforts that we often take for granted. And it kind of really resonated for me because, as you said, Suriname is one of the most vulnerable countries, second most vulnerable areas in the world for increasing sea level rise caused by climate change, predominantly from rich, industrialized countries that have colonized the planet, either economically, politically, over long periods of time, and taken advantage of that and have benefited in so many ways for themselves and contributed to this. And yet Suriname, which has in some sense subject to that disadvantage, is under such vulnerable threat. And yet we need to be improving people's livelihoods. We need to increase their well-being, people's well-being as they design it. And this is a really powerful way to do so. It's switching over from those traditional industrial processes, that industrial model of growth, to a nature-based economy, dare we say, a regenerative economy. I think that's incredibly bold and powerful. What are some of these bioeconomy approaches that you hope to advance and to help accelerate for the people and communities in Suriname?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. So first off, we're beyond the piloting phase, right? Because at Conservation International, we've done this. We've built one bioeconomy based venture in the deep south of the country, a place where you can only get by taking an airplane for 2 hours, a small airplane right by the border with Brazil, deep in the Amazon forest. And we've built a Brazil nut processing plant that is now currently feeding and providing income to an entire village. And that village is now helping to protect 235,000 hectares of pristine rainforest. So it actually works. And in this case, it's Brazil nut processing, making oil, making roasted nuts. And the thing to remember here, Chad, is that we're going to survive climate change. Now, we're not going to beat climate change because it's here, but we're going to survive climate change by making better decisions, one person at a time. Yeah. And that means that it's our job, or that's the mission I took on, to help create options for, and not just anybody, the people that are actually, on the one hand, the stewards of this forest, and on the other hand, that are the most vulnerable, because it's those people that are currently caring for our forests, the indigenous and tribal communities of Suriname and others. They are the ones maintaining the lifeline, because if we lose our forests, that's it. It's game over. So they are our last line of defense, and we have to strengthen them. It's only by strengthening them and enabling them to maintain living in harmony with with nature that we're really going to solve this. And when I say solve it, I don't mean stopping climate change, because that's done. That game is over. That race has been run. Now it's about adapting, minimizing, and strengthening ourselves and our ability to come from this. Because humanity will survive. The question is, what will it look like, and who's going to be part of it?
Absolutely. And, I love that you're making this distinction, because so many folks say we can stop climate change. And we can't stop climate. And I know people who are listening who are fans of my work at, past work at Project Drawdown, the work we do at Regenerative Intelligence. And you say, well, don't you say you can stop climate change? And I say, no, we can stop global warming. We can even reverse global warming. That is actually possible, but we can't stop climate change, because climate change is a product of global warming. It has changes all the time. It's affecting our biodiversity, our ecosystems all the time. And there's no reversing it back to some other ideal path. We're already on that trajectory. We're already seeing built-in climate change from our global warming that we've already put into the system. And sure, we can stop global warming, but we're not going to stop climate change. It's still going to keep going. So we have to figure out ways that we can adapt to that changing climate. And I think this is what you're doing here in Suriname is so important, because it's how we mitigate and adapt to this. We create a more resilient system, and the best solutions to stop global warming and to adapt to climate change are ones that take that approach, a more resilient system, human and our natural systems. And you're linking that together. One question I have for you is, you're working with local and indigenous peoples. And as we know, local and indigenous peoples are the best caretakers of our ecosystems. They've been doing it for millennia. They know how to, it's an integral part of the way indigenous peoples think and operate and work as a community. How are you engaged in them? So I also work a lot very closely with indigenous communities from all over the world. And one of the challenges that are often brought up by elders and leaders in the community is the commodification of nature. Taking these Western, more Western approaches to economies, to natural resource management, and applying that to indigenous frameworks or indigenous knowledge systems, which often don't see this as natural resources or commodification or economies. They just see it as a way of life. Now, I think these can be done in tandem, but like, how do you approach that in this work that you're doing and want to accelerate in Suriname? How do you bridge that gap between sort of Western views of, resource management, economies, and more indigenous traditional ways of viewing livelihoods and community?
Right. Well, the short answer, Chad, is that I don't try to bring in these Western ideas because we've tried that in the past and it's failed, right? So when we speak with our friends in for example, Alapadu, one of these communities where we've built this processing plant, when it's time for them to go see family, the factory closes. Doesn't matter if there are orders pending, doesn't matter if there's more to be roasted or more to be pressed. They're living their lives and they're living it in such a way that they don't take more than they need. And they are not interested in endless growth. Let's be very clear about that, right? So it's not about endless growth. It's about taking need and giving back as much or more as what you've taken. And that's how these communities often live in harmony because they don't distinguish between what we say there's nature and there's us. They say, no, there is no us or nature. There is only nature. There is only us. So when trying to think or communicate in these other ways, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. And they very politely nod and say, yeah, sure, John.
Right. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, it's really just about recognizing how to help them find their best path. And often I'm not the one to know that. For example, this idea about the Brazil nuts didn't come from me or from us. It came from the chief that said, listen, we have 7,000 Brazil nut trees. We've been trying to figure out a way how to make a living so that our youth can eat from it. We want you to help us. And I said, okay. Well, that was So same thing in Tepu, where we're working on ornamental fisheries. This village is known for their ornamental fisheries. And they said, Mr. Goesdschalk, John, you did a nice job over there in Alapadu with the Brazil nuts. Now it's time for you to come help us and commercialize this in a way that we can send our children to school because we see that they need this other type of schooling. And again, it is doing it their way, at their pace, respecting their customs, and not thinking that it's about how much money can you make, because they're not interested in maximizing profit. They're interested in maximizing life.
Life, exactly. Like every other ecosystem on this planet, every ecosystem on the planet operates for one purpose, to ensure life thrives in abundance. And indigenous communities, original nations, they see part embedded in their knowledge system. This is just part of the fabric of it, how to make sure life thrives in abundance and our role in that. I think that's, I'd love to talk to you more about this after our show. John, as you know, with regenerative intelligence, we're launching a project initiative called Project Bulls, working with indigenous communities from all over the world to get indigenous solutions, indigenous technology and practices. And I think this would be a really great project and a connection to have as we build out Project Peoples with you all. Because I think what you're doing here, and this is why, because I think what you're doing here can be a model, right? And this is what we want to do with Project Peoples and other kind of work that we're doing with regenerative intelligence, Regen Intel, is how do we take these examples that are working, like you said, the victories that are happening all over the world, the victories that inspired you and emboldened you to make that leap back to Suriname and to do the work that you're doing now. There are many of those examples out there that connect as models for other regions, other communities, can even be applied outside of the biophysical regions that we think, well, it only works in Suriname. Well, actually, could probably some lessons can be learned for every part of the world from that work, because it's about listening, and it's about listening and adapting and learning. What plans do you have to take your quest and spread those learnings that you garner, that you gain from the projects you launched in Suriname? Is there any plan to kind of use that as a model?
Well, first things first, Chad, we've got a lot of work to do here in Suriname first, right? So I'm a very big believer in, make sure it works, prove it works, then replicate and offer it to others. And, yes, we've had some modicum of success, but I'm not nearly satisfied with where we are right now. Once we've got, let's say, 10 of these bio ventures up and running, because we're going for 200. We want to build 200 economy-based ventures in Suriname over the next 5 years. That's what we want. That's what we're going for. It's big, it's bold, it's ambitious, and it's possible. If we put our hearts into it, we can make this happen.
Yes.
We can. So once we get success, then we say, let's scale up to wherever else it works. And like you said just now, it's not about trying to come up with ways and then kind of like force them upon others. It's about going about this in a very respectful manner when offering these models to others, right? Because if there's one thing I've learned, is that no model scales beyond today, right? As soon as you start taking things into the future or other places, you're going to have to be very open and respectful in how to change it, to make it work for the local people, to make it work in the context. Because what works for the Trio people here does not have to work for the Kayapo people, for example, in Brazil. But the underlying principles of helping to connect market economies and helping to recognize the value of the bioeconomy while allowing people to maintain their cultural practices and the way they engage with the forest, I do think that's fundamental. And I do think that's something that will scale. Again, connecting international markets to local values and traditions and finding the right types of products and markets to develop. Because that's really the big key here. It's getting that international valuation and recognition of these different products that the forest offers.
And maybe helping us, redefine what our value is in the economy, like how we see the ultimate value from profit to well-being. And I think that's going to be really key. And that's when I was thinking about that interchange between Western scientific approaches to our market economy versus, traditional and indigenous knowledge systems. It's very much, there's cross-learning to happen for sure. When you speak to indigenous communities, there's often a desire or interest to incorporate some thinking. But there's also the reverse, though. How do we switch to our way of thinking as a market-based economy to new ways of valuing ourselves and nature and the way we operate together as community as part of a new model of regrowth, an economy of regrowth, not just endless growth or even degrowth. We need to be thinking about regrowth, how we are together here. And that's my quest for creating that regenerative future and why I'm doing this podcast, to learn about the great planetary great thinkers and doers like yourself, John, who are doing amazing work, helping to build that regenerative economy of regrowth and bridging those knowledge systems. What's your vision of a regenerative future?
It really comes down to don't take more than you need and recognize that everything you take beyond your actual needs, you are taking from your children. And that means a regenerative future to me is one where we respect what is our children's. So, and that's something that we learned from the indigenous. They say they never talk about themselves. They always talk about themselves and our children. So a regenerative future, I guess, is one where we live with what has been given to us. And that's plenty if you look around and recognize what we have. And respect of what is not ours. Respect what's our children's and beyond,
I love that, John. Thank you. I feel like I've taken another step on my journey, on my quest for that regenerative future, just listening to that. That's very powerful. And it reminds me of something, one of the moments that I really love about meeting you and spending time with you. And I'm going to recount this story for folks. And this is who John is as a human and how I see you as a human. I recall after a fun evening at the events that we were at together in Rio, you and I and some others went to a restaurant very late and had some delicious food. Do you remember that, John? And you ordered so much food. And I was thinking to myself, my God, this is so much. We can eat all this. It was a big giant bowl of chicken, if you recall. And it was delicious. But I looked at it, and looked at each other. And we're like, there's no possible way we were ever going to finish it. And then we left and we packed all that up because, we don't waste food. We packed it all up. And I thought, oh, we'll just bring it back. And John, you were carrying it. And within a minute, we were passing some folks who were living on the street, who were, begging for food and for money. And you had it all ready to hand to them. And I realized, John, that you had ordered so much knowing that we weren't going to consume it so that you could give it away to people in need. And to a certain extent, I think that's part of what you are saying here as well. We obviously live what has been given to us and respect what's in our future. But if we have the opportunity to take more or to have more, we need to give that to those who are in great need. And I remember that moment very clearly, seeing you almost plan in advance to have food to give to others. And I just really respected that, John. I knew that was someone we were going to become fast friends. So thank you for joining me on my second episode of Chad's Climate Quest. I've learned a lot. I know the listeners have. And thank you, John.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for having me. And thanks for being my friend.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Chad's Climate Quest. Stay tuned for our next episode when I will be talking to another planetary-grade thinker and doer, implementing real solutions to create a regenerative future. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm thrilled to welcome you on my climate quest.